Legal and Privacy Brief for August 27, 2026. Meta settles for $17 billion with 52 state AGs, mandating strict child safety controls and expanded age verification across its platforms. Federal prosecutors seize Chinese government hacking infrastructure used against the Federal Reserve, DOJ, the Department of Justice, and U.S. Senate France's Constitutional Council strikes down a social media ban for minors under 15, ruling it violates free expression and privacy rights. Here's the full breakdown of today's top legal and privacy stories. Next section, enforcement actions. Meta reaches $16.7 billion settlement with 52 state AGs over child safety violations. Meta agreed to pay between $12.7 billion and $18 billion, capped at $16,680, $647,753, to settle claims that it violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, by collecting data from users under 13 through self-reported ages rather than rigorous verification, and concealed research showing Facebook and Instagram are addictive to minors. The settlement requires Meta to limit daily usage to 2 hours for users under 18, block platform access between midnight and 6 a.m., ban cosmetic surgery filters for minors, disable likes visibility for underage users, offer non-algorithmic feeds, and hire an independent auditor with direct reporting access to state AGs. Meta must respond to 90% of teen-reported harmful content within 12 hours and is barred from making false safety claims. The final payment amount depends on whether YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat implement similar controls. Compliance action. IT managers should review whether their platforms collect data from minors and evaluate age verification mechanisms for COPPA compliance. Companies offering services to minors should assess whether similar state AG actions could target their practices. The settlement establishes a precedent that self-reported ages are insufficient for COPPA compliance. Sources: Tech Policy, The Record, EFF. DOJ, the Department of Justice, seizes Chinese government hacking tools used against federal agencies. The Department of Justice announced the takedown of QScan and QT Router, hacking platforms operated by China-based Nanjing Xinjiang Network Technology Company and used by China's Ministry of State Security and People's Liberation Army. The tools were used to breach the Federal Reserve, Department of Energy, DOJ, U.S. Senate, NASA, Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, multiple hospitals, telecommunications providers, power companies, financial institutions, and defense contractors since 2018. QScan automatically infected EOT devices globally, while QT Router created an obfuscation network, making attacks appear to originate from infected devices in over 130 countries. The seized domains were hard-coded into both platforms, rendering them inoperable. Compliance action. Organizations should audit EOT devices, routers, security cameras for vulnerabilities and ensure security patches are current. Review network logs for connections to devices in unexpected geographic locations, which may indicate compromised infrastructure being used for obfuscation. Defense contractors and critical infrastructure operators should assess whether similar scanning activity targeted their networks. Source: The Record. Boston Scientific confirms cyber attack disrupting medical device shipments. Boston Scientific disclosed a cybersecurity incident discovered on August 26 that disrupted access to operating systems and business applications, preventing the company from processing and shipping customer orders globally. The medical device manufacturer, which produces pacemakers and stents, and reported $5.4 billion in net sales during Q2 2026, hired a cybersecurity firm to respond, but has not confirmed whether the incident involved ransomware. The company stated that the financial impact remains unclear and that a restoration timeline is unknown, with investors told recovery may take weeks. Compliance action. Healthcare organizations relying on Boston Scientific devices should contact the company for supply chain continuity plans and identify alternative suppliers for critical medical devices. Medical device manufacturers should review incident response plans for supply chain disruption scenarios and ensure patient safety protocols account for device availability gaps. Source: The Record. Next section, litigation updates. Equinox agrees to $685,000 data breach class action settlement. Equinox agreed to a $685,000 class action settlement to resolve claims arising from a 2024 data breach that compromised consumer information. Settlement details, claim deadlines, and covered class members were not disclosed in the initial announcement. Source: Top Class Actions. State Farm Louisiana settles total loss claims. Dispute. State Farm agreed to compensate Louisiana car insurance policyholders who submitted total loss claims that excluded purchasing fees. Class members must submit claims by October 19, 2026. The settlement amount was not disclosed. Compliance action. Auto insurers operating in Louisiana should review total loss claim calculations to ensure purchasing fees are properly included in settlement calculations to avoid similar disputes. Source: Top Class Actions. Detroit Water Rates Class Action Settlement provides $4.45 million in relief. The Detroit Water Rates Class Action Settlement provides $4.45 million to customers who paid allegedly unfair water rates. Eligibility criteria and claim procedures were not disclosed in the initial announcement. Source: Top Class Actions. Amazon reaches $309 million settlement over returns policy. Amazon.com agreed to a $309.5 million class action settlement, with consumers alleging the company shortchanged them on refunds for returned items. Settlement details regarding eligibility and claim procedures remain pending preliminary approval. Source: Top Class Actions. Pornhub settles child abuse content claims for $120 million. A federal judge will consider preliminary approval of a $120 million Pornhub class action settlement, combining claims from California plaintiff Jane Doe and an Alabama plaintiff involving allegations that the platform hosted child sexual abuse material. The settlement does not resolve numerous other lawsuits from parents, users, and school districts. Source: Top Class Actions. CareCloud data breach affects 3.75 million patients. CareCloud confirmed a data breach affecting more than 3.75 million patients nationwide, initially disclosed to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, in March 2026. The breach involved personal patient data, though specific data types compromised were not detailed. Compliance action. Healthcare providers using CareCloud should notify affected patients, offer credit monitoring services, and review HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, breach notification compliance. Covered entities must assess whether the breach triggers reporting obligations to HHS and state AGs. Source: Top Class Actions. 11th Circuit remands Georgia redistricting case after Supreme Court VRA ruling. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit remanded Georgia's congressional redistricting dispute to a lower court for review in light of the Supreme Court's recent Louisiana v. Calais decision, which limited how redistricting maps can remedy racial discrimination under the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court held 6-3 that Louisiana's second majority black congressional district was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. In the Georgia case, a judge had previously ordered creation of 2 majority black Senate districts and 3 majority black House districts to remedy vote dilution in Metro Atlanta. Source: Scotto S. blog. Grand jury declines to indict flock Alper camera vandalism. Suspect: a Clermont County grand jury dismissed felony vandalism charges against Cody Morlock, who was accused of destroying a flock safety automated license plate reader camera in Union Township, Ohio, on June 13, 2026. Police had surveillance footage of the incident. The case reflects growing public opposition to Flock's Alper network, which captures 20 billion plate/vehicle images monthly and has been linked to law enforcement stalking and unauthorized federal access. Source: TechDirt. Next section: Regulatory Guidance. France's Constitutional Council strikes down social media ban for minors. France's Constitutional Council struck down legislation that would have banned social media use for people under 15 years old, scheduled to take effect January 2027. The Council ruled the ban violated Article 34 of the French Constitution by infringing on freedom of expression and communication in a manner that was not appropriate, necessary, or proportionate. The decision noted the law failed to distinguish between different online services and ignored individual circumstances, such as exact age, maturity level, and family situation. The Council also found that requiring all users, including adults, to prove their age before accessing platforms violated the right to private life under Article 2 of the Déclaration de 1789. President Emmanuel Macron tasked Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu with reworking the legislation. Source: EFF. Louisiana and Texas teachers challenge 10 Commandments display laws. Louisiana teacher Chris Deere filed a petition urging the Supreme Court to hear his constitutional challenge to a state law requiring 10 Commandments displays in K-12 and college classrooms. Texas families filed a related petition challenging a similar 2025 Texas law. Both cases raise Establishment Clause questions about government-mandated religious displays in public school classrooms. Source: Scotto S. blog. Trump administration proposes government-wide non-disclosure agreement for federal employees. The Trump administration proposed in May 2026 the first government-wide non-disclosure agreement covering nearly everything federal employees learn on the job, including pre-decisional or deliberative material, with obligations extending beyond federal service. Under a companion suitability rule, refusing to sign is grounds for removal and debarment from federal employment for up to 3 years. Compliance action. Federal contractors and defense contractors should assess whether employees with security clearances or government access will be subject to the new NDA requirements. Organizations hiring former federal employees should review employment agreements to ensure they do not conflict with expanded federal non-disclosure obligations. Source: Lawfare. Next section, privacy developments. EFF publishes policy position on ALPR surveillance. The Electronic Frontier Foundation released a formal policy position stating that automated license plate reader ALPR mass surveillance should not exist because it creates irredeemable harm through indiscriminate, continuous collection and retention of location data on every driver, regardless of suspicion. EFF called for outright refusal of ALPR purchasing at the city level and urged state legislatures to establish strict limits, including warrant requirements and data deletion deadlines. EFF is currently litigating against the San Jose Police Department in California State Court, with a cluency on behalf of Siren and CareCA over warrantless searches of stored plate data occurring over 100,000 times per year, arguing violations of the California Constitution. Compliance action. Municipalities considering ALPR contracts should review EFF's policy framework and assess whether local ordinances require warrant procedures and retention limits. Law enforcement agencies should audit ALPR query logs for unauthorized access patterns, particularly officer searches unrelated to active investigations. Source: EFF. AI watermarking mandates create surveillance risks for journalists. Human rights organization Witness released a report warning that mandatory AI watermarking under the EU AI Act and similar laws create surveillance risks for journalists, human rights defenders, and documentary filmmakers. The C2PA standard, implemented by tech companies for image and video watermarking, currently attaches creator identity details, name, email, country, to content credentials by default. Witness documented a scenario where a filmmaker, using C2PA-enabled software, unknowingly exported footage of labor organizing with her personal details embedded, compromising source anonymity when submitting the clip to a press freedom organization. Compliance action. Media organizations using C2PA-enabled production software should audit default configuration settings to disable identity extensions in content credentials for sensitive journalism. Newsrooms should establish protocols for stripping their data from anonymously submitted footage before verification or publication. Source: TechDirt. Iran-linked hackers expand infrastructure across Europe and Middle East. Group IB researchers identified new infrastructure linked to Iranian threat actor Tortoiseshell, including servers hosted in Britain, UK1 and UK2, Belgium, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Researchers discovered new malware samples including a 2-stroke backdoor variant and a reverse SSH tunnel tool. Tortoiseshell, active since 2018 and linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, primarily targets defense, aerospace, technology, and military organizations. The purpose of the European infrastructure remains unclear. Source: The Record. Next section, policy changes. NSA hosts first-ever reunion for elite hacking unit. The National Security Agency hosted a first-of-its-kind reunion on August 29, 2026 for alumni of Tailored Access Operations, TAO, the agency's elite hacking unit responsible for breaking into foreign computer systems. The event, spearheaded by NSA Deputy Director Tim Kozaba, included a tour of the new TAO building and recruitment pitches to former members. NSA organized the gathering partially through an invitation-only signal group chat dubbed Terminated Async Operations that ballooned to over 250 former hackers, developers, and analysts. The outreach reflects NSA's broader push to build public trust, including creation of a cybersecurity directorate in 2019 and launch of an agency podcast in 2024. Source: The Record. OpenAI disrupts Cambodian social engineering network. Using ChatGPT, OpenAI disrupted a social engineering operation from Cambodia that used ChatGPT to conduct multiple scam types simultaneously, including romance scams, transitioning to fraudulent cryptocurrency investments, fake online gambling bonuses, and law enforcement impersonation, demanding fine payments. Operators created fake dating profiles, fictitious investment experts, fraudulent law enforcement personas, and generated images of forged documents including passports, legal notices, stock purchase confirmations, and gambling platform interfaces. Source: Schneier on security. Next section, compliance takeaways. Age verification is now mandatory for COPPA compliance. Meta's $17 billion settlement establishes that self-reported ages are insufficient. Review data collection, practices for services used by minors, and implement rigorous age verification mechanisms before additional state AG enforcement actions. Audit EOT devices for vulnerabilities exploited by nation-state actors. The DOJ's seizure of Chinese hacking infrastructure targeting federal agencies via compromised routers and cameras demonstrates that EOT devices remain critical attack vectors. Ensure security patches are current and monitor for geographic anomalies in network traffic. Age gating mandates create privacy risks for all users, not just minors. Organizations implementing age verification in response to regulatory pressure should minimize data collection and avoid storing government ID or biometric scans that create breach exposure and surveillance risks. C2PA watermarking defaults can compromise source anonymity. Media organizations and journalists using production software with content credentials should disable identity extensions to protect confidential sources and whistleblowers from unintended metadata disclosure. ALPR warrant requirements are emerging at the state level. Law enforcement agencies and municipalities with ALPR contracts should prepare for legislative restrictions on warrantless queries and retention periods, particularly in jurisdictions where constitutional challenges are active. That concludes today's legal and privacy brief. From Carolina Clear Tech, for informational purposes only, not legal advice.